Close your eyes for a moment and think about Surah Yaseen. You've heard it your whole life. You've recited it at funerals, in moments of hardship, and on quiet nights when your heart needed comfort. But what if I told you that most people who read Surah Yaseen have never truly seen it? Hidden within this single chapter are layers of meaning so deep that scholars have reflected on them for centuries. Meanings that challenge how we understand faith, destiny, time, accountability, and even the universe itself. Yet almost no one talks about them. Why does this surah begin with mysterious letters no human being can fully explain? How does its structure defy everything we know about ancient literature? Why does it speak about recording footsteps in a way that feels unsettlingly modern? And what is it about Surah Yaseen that earned it the title, the heart of the Qur'an? Tonight we're uncovering 7 hidden mysteries within Surah Yaseen. Each one is powerful on its own. Together, they completely transform how this surah sounds, feels, and lives within you. If these questions stirred something in your heart, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always inspiring to see how far this message reaches. Now let's begin the journey. The very first sound of Surah Yaseen is not a command, not a story, not a warning. It is something far more unsettling and far more intriguing. 2 letters, Ya, sin. They arrive without explanation. No definition follows. No clarification is given. The surah does not pause to tell you what they mean, and that silence is intentional. From the very first second, the Qur'an places you in a position of humility. You are listening, but you are not in control. You are being addressed, but not everything is meant to be grasped immediately. These letters belong to a category known as the disjointed letters that appear at the beginning of certain chapters of the Qur'an. But Yasin is different. It stands apart. Scholars across centuries notice that while many surahs begin with such letters, Surah Yasin carries a unique weight and tone. It feels personal, almost intimate, as if the surah is speaking before it even speaks. Some scholars understood Yasin as a direct address to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, not as a title but as a form of closeness, a call that does not need explanation because the one being called already understands. Others saw in it a broader meaning, a call to humanity itself, reminding the listener that this message is not abstract. It is meant for living, breathing people with hearts that struggle, doubt, hope, and return. But what deepens the mystery is not disagreement, it is restraint. Despite centuries of study, the scholars never claimed certainty. They stopped themselves at a boundary and said these letters are from the knowledge Allah kept with himself. That pause is important. In a world obsessed with answers, Yasin teaches something radical. Not everything is meant to be decoded. Some things are meant to be encountered. There is also something quietly astonishing beneath the surface. When scholars explored the numerical values of these letters using the ancient Arabic system of calculation, patterns emerged that echoed themes found throughout Islamic tradition. Completion, wholeness, perfection. Not as proof, not as mathematics meant to convince, but as signs for those who reflect. Subtle, unforced, like whispers rather than declarations. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of Yasin is what happens immediately after it. The surah does not linger. It moves straight into affirming revelation, mercy, and purpose. It is as if those 2 letters prepare the heart before the message arrives. They soften the listener. They unsettle certainty. They quietly say, there is more here than you think. And that may be the greatest mystery of all. Yasin does not explain itself because it is not meant to. It draws you in, lowers your defenses, and reminds you that approaching divine speech requires humility before intelligence, submission before analysis, presence before certainty. And just when you think the mystery ends there, the surah reveals something even more astonishing. If the opening letters challenge what we think we can know, what happens when we look at how the surah itself is built? Could the structure of Surah Yasin be carrying a message just as profound as its words? And what if the design of the surah is itself a sign that cannot be explained by human ability alone? That question takes us directly into the next mystery. This is where the second mystery begins, the surah's ring structure. A ring structure, sometimes called ring composition, is a style of arrangement where the beginning and the end mirror each other. and the sections in between are paired in a way that leads you inward toward a central core. Think of it like walking into a palace with corridors that match on both sides, guiding you deeper and deeper until you reach the main chamber. Then, as you continue, the path reflects itself back out. The experience is symmetrical, intentional, and impossible to mistake once you've seen it. Surah Yaseen has this kind of architecture. It is not random. It is not a series of disconnected topics stitched together. It is layered, balanced, measured. Themes appear, then return later in a matching form. Arguments rise, then answer themselves. Warnings echo back to promises, signs in the world mirror signs in the soul. And the entire surah is built to lead your attention to one central message that everything revolves around. When you begin reading from the start, the surah establishes a foundation. Revelation is real, the message is true, and guidance has been sent with purpose. But as you move forward, the surah shifts into scenes that challenge the listener's assumptions. It brings you into the struggle between truth and denial, between those who hear and those who resist, between hearts that open and hearts that lock themselves shut. The surah doesn't just tell you what people believe, it shows you what belief does to a person, what rejection does to a person, and how every human being is quietly moving toward one of those two states. Then as you move deeper, you reach the middle, the most intense part, where the surah becomes like a courtroom and a mirror at the same time. This central core is not placed there by accident. In ring structures, the center is the heart of the message, and everything around it is built to bring you there. It is the part meant to land with the most force, because by the time you reach it, your mind has been prepared, your heart has been softened, and your excuses have been stripped away. What makes this mystery even more striking is what happens after the center. The surah begins to move outward again, but now in reflection. Themes reappear in a way that feels like an answer, or a conclusion, or a return to the beginning, but with deeper weight because you've traveled through the middle. The ending does not feel like a new topic. It feels like a closing door that matches the opening door, sealing the message the way a ring closes into itself. It leaves you with the same sense you felt at the beginning, but now it is no longer curiosity alone. It is certainty mixed with awe. And here's the part that should stop you. This kind of structure is not the way most people speak casually. It is not the way spontaneous preaching usually forms. Ring composition requires planning, precision, and an awareness of the whole while writing every part. The sections have to match in theme, in placement. The balance has to hold. The center has to be positioned with intention. And when it's done well, it doesn't feel mechanical. It feels natural, like it was always meant to be that way. So the question becomes uncomfortable. How does a surah delivered in a living community, revealed over time, recited publicly, memorized, taught, and transmitted, carry such a tightly woven architecture? Even more uncomfortable for someone trying to reduce it to human effort is that this structure isn't a flashy trick. It doesn't announce itself. It waits for the listener to discover it. The more you study, the more you realize the Qur'an doesn't merely persuade with arguments, it persuades with design. It doesn't only speak to your logic. It surrounds your mind with a structure that forces your heart to move inward toward the point it cannot avoid. That is why this mystery matters. It is not just literary beauty, it's a form of guidance. The surah is built like a journey so that even if you start reading distracted, it pulls you toward a confrontation with the truth at its center. You may think you're simply reciting, but the surah is arranging your attention, steering your reflection, and placing you exactly where you need to be. And now, once you see that the surah is engineered with such care, another question should rise in your mind. If Surah Yaseen is designed like a circle that brings you face to face with accountability, then what does it say about what you leave behind as you move through life? If the surah is structured to pull you inward toward truth, could there be a verse inside it that speaks directly to the invisible trail you are leaving every single day? What if the Qur'an doesn't only talk about deeds in general, but talks about traces so specific that they follow you long after you think you're gone? That question leads us straight into the next mystery. In the middle of Surah Yaseen, Allah makes a statement that sounds simple at first, almost easy to pass over. He speaks about recording deeds, but then he goes further. He mentions something most people never pause to think about: footsteps, traces, not just what you do, but what you leave behind. This is where the third mystery begins. A footprint is something temporary. You step, you move on, and the mark fades. At least that's what we assume. But Surah Yaseen quietly challenges that assumption. It suggests that nothing truly fades. Every movement, every direction you choose, every path you walk leaves an imprint that does not disappear just because you can no longer see it. The wording here is deliberate and unsettling. It does not speak only about actions in a general sense. It speaks about the lasting effects of those actions, the ripple after the stone hits the water, the echo after the sound has stopped, the consequences that continue long after the moment has passed. This means accountability in the Qur'an is not limited to what you intended or even what you directly did. It includes what your actions set in motion, the habits you normalize, the influence you leave behind, the doors you open for others, whether toward good or toward harm. A single word spoken in anger might be forgotten by you within minutes, but it may replay in someone else's heart for years. A small act of kindness might feel insignificant to you, yet quietly change the direction of another person's life. A step toward wrongdoing might not end with you, but invite others to follow the same path. And every one of those outcomes leaves a trace. What makes this mystery even more striking is how familiar it suddenly feels in the modern world. Today, we understand traces better than any generation before us. Every click, every search, every location, every interaction leaves a record. We live surrounded by invisible documentation. We no longer doubt that our movements can be tracked. But Surah Yaseen spoke about this reality long before technology made it obvious. And it does not present it as cold surveillance. It presents it as moral truth. Allah is not recording to humiliate or trap. He is recording to establish justice, to ensure that nothing good is lost and nothing harmful escapes accountability. There is also something deeply merciful hidden inside this warning, because if traces can carry harm forward, they can also carry reward forward. Every step taken toward goodness, every effort made sincerely, every sacrifice no one noticed continues to exist beyond the moment it was done. Even after you are gone, the effects of your choices can still be speaking on your behalf. This changes how you see your life. You realize that you are never simply passing through the world. You are shaping it in small, quiet ways every single day. Your presence has weight. Your absence will have consequences. And the record Allah keeps is far more complete than the one you keep in your memory. Once this sinks in, the surah feels different. You stop hearing it as distant guidance meant for others. You begin to hear it as a direct address to you, to your movements, your influence, your everyday choices that seem too small to matter. And now a new question should be forming in your mind. If every trace matters, if every step is preserved, then what about the people who chose to leave behind the strongest traces of all? What about someone whose single act of courage echoed so powerfully that Allah preserved it forever in His book? Who was that person, and why did his footsteps deserve to be remembered for all generations? This is where the fourth mystery begins. In the middle of the surah, the flow suddenly shifts from reflection to story. Not the story of a prophet, not the story of a king, not the story of a nation blessed with miracles. Instead, we are introduced to a single, unnamed man, and the Qur'an does not even begin by telling us who he was. It tells us what he did. He came running. That detail matters more than it seems. He did not walk calmly. He did not arrive after careful calculation. He ran. From the farthest part of the city, which means distance did not stop him. Fear did not slow him down. Social pressure did not silence him. When truth was being rejected and messengers were being mocked, something inside him refused to remain still. This man was not described as a scholar or a leader. He had no authority, no army, no position of power. He was simply someone whose heart recognized truth and could not tolerate seeing it crushed by arrogance and denial. While others watched from a distance, he moved toward danger. When he reached the people, his words were not harsh. They were sincere, almost pleading. He asked them to follow those who sought no reward. He reminded them that guidance was not a threat, but a mercy. There is no argument here built on status or force, just reason, humility, and concern. And then the story takes a turn that feels painfully familiar to human history. They killed him. No trial, no mercy, no pause. A man whose only crime was speaking truth and urging goodness was silenced violently by his own people. His footsteps stopped, or so it seemed. But this is where the mystery deepens. The moment his life ended, the Qur'an lifts the veil. We are allowed to see what usually remains hidden. He is told to enter paradise, and his first response is not relief, not triumph, not satisfaction. His first thought is for the very people who murdered him. If only they knew. If only they knew what he was seeing. If only they understood what forgiveness looks like when it meets sincerity. If only they realized what they had lost by rejecting the truth. Think about that for a moment. A man beaten and killed for his faith does not ask for revenge. He does not ask for justice against them. He wishes guidance for them. Even after death, his concern is still outward, not inward. This is why his story is here. This is why his footsteps were recorded. Allah could have filled this surah with the names of kings and nations, but instead he chose to immortalize an ordinary believer whose courage was invisible to the world and priceless in the sight of God. This story quietly reshapes how we understand significance. It tells us that impact is not measured by fame or authority, but by sincerity and action taken at the moment it mattered most. And there is something else hidden in this story that often goes unnoticed. The man ran when others stayed seated. He spoke when others stayed silent. He moved toward responsibility when comfort would have been easier. His life teaches us that belief is not only something held in the heart, it is something that moves the body. It creates motion. It produces footsteps. And suddenly the earlier mystery comes back into focus. Traces matter. This man's steps were not erased by death. They became eternal. His courage did not vanish. It was preserved in revelation, recited by millions, generation after generation. A single moment of bravery became a permanent sign. And now the question shifts to us. If an ordinary man could run toward truth, knowing it might cost him everything, what stops us when the cost is discomfort, criticism, or fear of standing alone? What kind of traces are we choosing to leave behind? But Surah Yaseen does not allow us to linger too long in self-reflection. It lifts our eyes again, away from the city and its people, away from the ground and its footsteps, and points us upward. Because if the courage of one man is a sign, what about the signs written across the entire universe? What about the movements that never stop, never collide, never break their balance? What if the same power that honored the footsteps of this believer is the power that controls the sun and the moon themselves? That question draws us into the next mystery. Surah Yaseen turns your attention to the sky, but not in a poetic or symbolic way. It speaks with calm certainty, as if describing something already settled, already known. It talks about the sun and the moon, about motion, order, and boundaries. At first glance, these verses sound simple, familiar, almost obvious. The sun rises, the moon appears, day follows night. We hear these ideas so often that we stop questioning them. But Surah Yaseen asks you to slow down and really look. The sun is described as moving toward a destination, not drifting aimlessly, not fixed in place, moving with purpose. For most of human history, this idea would have sounded strange. People looked at the sky and assumed the sun was constant and unmoving, while everything else revolved around it. Even when scientific thinking evolved, the sun was still treated as the stable center. Yet Surah Yaseen presents a different picture. It speaks of motion embedded into creation itself, a universe where even the most dominant body in our sky is traveling, obedient to a command beyond itself. Then the surah brings in the moon, not as a rival, not as a follower, but as part of a precise balance. Neither overtakes the other, neither disrupts the rhythm. Night does not overpower day, and day does not erase night. Each moves within limits that are never crossed. This is not just astronomy, it is a lesson in restraint. Everything in the universe has power, but nothing uses it without permission. Everything has motion, but nothing moves outside its boundaries. The sun does not rush ahead. The moon does not fall behind. The system does not collapse into chaos. It holds perfectly, moment after moment. And then there is a word choice that quietly changes how you imagine space itself. The surah describes these celestial bodies as moving in a way that suggests ease, flow, and continuity. Not jerky motion, not collision, something closer to gliding, almost like swimming. That detail matters because it challenges the idea that space is empty and lifeless. Instead, it hints at a universe filled with order, structure, and unseen forces that carry everything along its path. A creation that is active, not static, alive with command. What makes this mystery so powerful is not that it tries to prove anything. It does not argue. It does not demand belief. It simply states what is, calmly, confidently, as if daring the listener to catch up. And once you do, the realization hits quietly but deeply. The same authority that preserved the footsteps of a believer, the same authority that designed the structure of the surah, is the authority that governs the stars above your head. Nothing is accidental. Nothing is free from oversight. From the smallest trace on earth to the largest body in the sky, everything moves within a system of meaning. At this point, Surah Yaseen has done something remarkable. It has taken you from mysterious letters to inner reflection, to human courage, and now to cosmic order. It has expanded your sense of scale. You feel small, but not insignificant. You feel surrounded, but not lost. And then a question begins to form, one that the surah knows is coming. If the sun moves with purpose, if the moon follows a precise path, if the entire universe obeys command without resistance, then what about human life? What about death? What about what comes after everything seems to stop? If Allah can sustain this level of order across the cosmos, is bringing life back after death really difficult? That question pulls us directly into the next mystery. The surah brings us into a moment that feels almost confrontational. A human being challenges the very idea of resurrection, not with philosophy, but with mockery. The question is simple and sharp. How can life return once the body has completely fallen apart? Once strength is gone, once form is lost, once everything has turned to dust, how could anything possibly come back? It is a question that has echoed through every age. Even today, wrapped in scientific language, it is the same doubt. Once something breaks down beyond recognition, we assume the story is over. Surah Yaseen responds in a way that is both devastatingly logical and deeply humbling. It does not engage in complex debate. It takes the listener back to a place they often forget to look. The beginning. The answer is not framed as a miracle that defies reason, but as a reminder of reason itself. The one who brought life into existence the first time is fully capable of bringing it back again. Creating from nothing is not easier than restoring what already existed. If existence itself was possible once, then renewal is not a stretch, it is consistency. But the surah does not stop there. It draws attention to a sign people witnessed in their daily lives. Something so ordinary they barely noticed how strange it actually was. Fire emerging from something green, from something fresh, from something that should, by every assumption, extinguish flames rather than produce them. This example quietly dismantles human certainty. We think we understand cause and effect. We think we know what can come from what. But creation constantly reminds us that opposites can emerge from one another when commanded. Life from death, heat from moisture, strength from weakness, resurrection from decay. And then Surah Yaseen delivers one of the most profound statements in the entire Qur'an. Creation does not require effort, tools, or time. It happens by command. Intention alone is enough. This shifts everything. Resurrection is no longer a technical problem to be solved. It becomes a question of authority. The issue is not whether scattered remains can be gathered. The issue is who is in charge of existence itself. And once that settles in, resistance begins to feel less intellectual and more emotional. The denial of resurrection is not really about impossibility. It is about accountability. If life ends permanently, then actions lose weight. If there is no return, then traces do not matter. But Surah Yaseen has already dismantled that comfort. It has shown that footsteps are recorded, courage is preserved, and even the stars obey command. Resurrection, then, is not an isolated belief. It is the natural conclusion of everything that came before it in the surah. The universe is ordered. Human actions carry consequences. Nothing disappears without meaning. So how could death be an exception? This mystery does not exist to terrify. It exists to clarify. It tells the listener that justice does not end at the grave, that loss is not final, that suffering is not ignored, and that goodness is never wasted. It reassures the oppressed and unsettles the arrogant at the same time. And now, after traveling through mystery after mystery, something becomes clear. Surah Yaseen has not been jumping between random themes. It has been building something carefully. Each mystery prepares the heart for the next. Each answer opens a deeper question. Each reflection brings the listener closer to the center of meaning. Which leads to one final question. Why this surah? Why does this single chapter carry so much weight, so many layers, so much emotional and spiritual force? Why has it been described as the heart of the Qur'an? And what does that actually mean for the one who recites it? The answer lies in the final mystery. When most people hear the phrase heart of the Qur'an, they assume it's simply an honor, a beautiful title. But the deeper you look, the more you realize it's a description of function, not poetry. A heart is not important because it is admired. A heart is important because everything depends on it. It keeps life moving. It pumps what the body needs to every part of the body, constantly, quietly, without stopping. Surah Yaseen works in a similar way. It carries the core message of Islam in a way that reaches every part of the believer's inner world. It doesn't speak to only one type of person. It speaks to the doubter and the confident, to the sinner and the struggler, to the grieving and the distracted, to the one who feels close to Allah and the one who feels far away. That's why it lands differently when you recite it. It doesn't just inform you, it moves you. If you step back and look at what you've traveled through in this surah, you begin to notice something. It touches every major reality the human heart wrestles with. It begins by anchoring you in the truth of revelation, reminding you that guidance is not a human invention, and that mercy is not a vague hope. It confronts denial, not to win an argument, but to show what denial does to a soul. It warns that actions leave traces, not to crush you, but to wake you up while there is still time to change what you are leaving behind. It gives you the story of a believer who ran toward truth, so you understand that faith is not passive. It's movement, it's courage, it's choosing truth even when comfort is easier. It points to the sky so you realize you are not living in chaos, but in a universe built with precision. And then it confronts death and resurrection so directly that the illusion of this is all there is becomes almost impossible to hold on to. In other words, Surah Yaseen does something rare. It gives you the worldview of Islam, but not as a lecture. It gives it to you as an experience. It pulls you into reflection, then warns you, then comforts you, then challenges you, then expands your perspective, then brings you back to the unavoidable truth that you will return to Allah. That is why it feels like it reaches the core of you. And this is where the title heart becomes even more meaningful, because the Quran does not treat the heart as just a symbol of emotion. In the Quranic way of seeing, the heart is where a person truly perceives, truly understands, truly chooses. You can have intelligence and still be blind. You can have knowledge and still be far. You can speak truth and still not taste it. The heart is the place where the message either becomes real or stays distant. So when Surah Yaseen is called the heart of the Quran, it is not simply saying it is beautiful, it is saying it nourishes the place where faith lives or dies. That also explains why it shows up in the most sensitive moments of life. When someone is struggling, the heart needs steadiness. Surah Yaseen gives that steadiness by reminding the soul that life is not random and hardship is not pointless. When someone is close to death, the heart needs clarity. Surah Yaseen gives that clarity by bringing the reality of return into focus without drowning the listener in despair. And when someone feels spiritually numb, the heart needs awakening. Surah Yaseen does not only awaken through fear, it awakens through meaning. It reminds the listener that mercy and power are not opposites, and that Allah's authority is not cold. It is purposeful, it is just, and it is always open to the one who turns back. There is another subtle reason it has this impact. Surah Yaseen does not let you stay in one emotional state for too long. It moves you through a range that mirrors human life itself. You hear warning, then you hear hope. You feel pressure, then you feel release. You are confronted, then you are guided. You are humbled, then you are uplifted. That movement is not accidental. It is one of the reasons people feel something shift inside them when they recite it. It reaches places that ordinary speech cannot reach because it is not ordinary speech. And that brings us to the deepest layer of the final mystery. Surah Yaseen is called the heart of the Qur'an, not because it is only for special occasions, but because it is meant to become part of your regular inner life. Like a heartbeat, it is meant to return again and again, keeping faith alive, keeping perspective clear, keeping the soul from slowly drifting into forgetfulness. If you only recite it as a ritual, it will remain familiar but distant. But if you recite it with attention, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a mirror that shows you where you are, a reminder that corrects your direction, a light that returns you to what matters when the world makes everything feel urgent except the most important things. And maybe that is the final question Surah Yaseen leaves you with. Even when the recitation ends, when was the last time you didn't just read it, but let it read you? When was the last time you recited it slowly enough to notice what it was doing to your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your choices? If this surah is truly the heart of the Quran, then what happens to a heart when it is neglected? And what happens when it is nourished consistently? Because the greatest secret might not be hidden in a complex interpretation. The greatest secret might be this. Surah Yaseen does not only teach you about the truth, it pulls you toward it. And if you've made it this far, then maybe that pull is already happening.